Hello guys, and welcome to my first video. So this is my first try at this, so hopefully I get everything across that I need to. So I want to talk pillow finishes because this is what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks and what I'm going to be explaining to you guys. So a couple years back now, I did a pile of pillow finishes for my family. This was in 2011. So I actually did these specially. This was Christmas. I did 22 of these little finishes for varying family members. So I got very good at doing this finish. So this is one of the versions we're going to be looking at. So doing just a cute little pillow with a cord. And this cord is just made using an acrylic yarn, and then you glue it around and carefully glue it in. And that's how you do this little finish. And then you got very, very simple one. This is probably the simplest you can do. It's just a simple little pillow and a ribbon. It's tied in a bow and glued at the top. So that's your simplest little pillow finish. Now this is one of the Margaret Sherry designs. I can't remember where I got it from, probably one of the magazines. These ones are from Rona Nori from Tangled Threads. She was selling her design separately for a while, and I managed to get a whole collection of these penguins. So I really love these ones. I don't know whether if you contact her you can get a hold of these designs anymore or not. But, so I got a couple done like that. And it's exactly the same for this slightly bigger one. So each one it's a very simple pillow finish. So today I'm going to be teaching just how to make the pillow. And next week we'll talk about all the different ways to do the trim and how to do each of the trims. So it's just step by step. And the other one, so again, this is just a normal pillow finish, but a different way of doing the ribbon around the outside, using some beads and that's a different thing you can do. Now, the other one is what do you do when you have a design that's just that little bit smaller than you want to finish the pillow? And that's where this comes in. So instead of just sewing the pillow around the edge of the Ada, I added on a little bit of fabric here to create a longer pillow. And that's something you can do very easily. And I'll actually be showing you how to do it because I'm going to today, we're going to finish this one as a normal pillow. So just sew it like these ones because it's roughly the same size. And then I've got this little owl. So he's only a little small one from my mini owl collection. And so I've got this little one. So I'm going to finish him with a border of fabric the whole way around, just to make it that little bit bigger and a little bit nicer and give it a bit of a frame before finishing. And this one I'm going to sew by hand and show you how to do it by hand. And this one I'm going to sew on the machine. So they both work really easily and really quickly. But you could do either or on machine or by hand. One thing to realize is if you're sewing by hand, it does take just a little bit longer. But whichever way you do it, you are going to have to finish by hand. No matter what, because you're always going to have to close it. Using what's called a ladder stitch. And you end up with that sort of closure. And then that's what a machine sewn seam looks like. So it just usually gets just that little bit tighter. But it can still look very neat by hand sewing. Now, to start with, when you're looking at your piece of fabric and you're deciding how you're going to finish it, you've decided you want to do a pillow finish, and in the case of this, we're going to be doing just a normal pillow finish with no added fabric. Now, here's my piece of fabric. With a fold where I've been folding it in my bag. And what we're going to do is you look at the edge of where your design is. And you work out how wide a seam you want around the edge of it. So in my case, I'm looking at about I think I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. I think I want to go about 5 stitches up. Okay, so go about 5 stitches up. Now I just use my needle then, but so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mark it with a pin. And I go round carefully. 1, 2. Carefully mark around. So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, so looking at that, that's exactly what I was after, the sort of border I was after. And so that's going to be the finished size of your pillow, is where those pins are. Now that's not where you're going to cut the Aida. Remember this bit. It's not where you're cutting. Where you're going to cut is about, I've found thing is about 4 stitches out is a good size seam. So I'm going to go get my scissors out and we're going to get around. Now, okay, a little bit on the extreme side there. Sometimes I do like to just cut the fabric off. Okay. Now, if any of you are quilters and you have a rotary cutter and the quilting things, use them. So much easier than a pair of scissors, but I'm trying to just show it with the scissors. So, what I do is I count, bring that down, then 1, 2, 3, 4 across. And the great thing with Aida cloth, is you've got this beautiful line to cut across. And now what I'll sometimes do If I really do need a bit of guidance, so I'll bring that down and stick another pin there so I can see where it crosses that point. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's also easier to cut when you're not trying to work around a camera. I'm trying to see it and also work around the back of the camera, which is not the easiest way to do this. But we do what we have to. So 1, 2, 3. Now you don't have to go exactly 5 stitches out from your picture. You can do the sort of border that you want to do. So if you want a wider border or a thinner border, that's up to you. You can even decide to add a patchwork border around the outside and make it a slightly bigger pillow. Yep. There we go. Okay, and you can see the owl with those pins still in at the 5 stitches mark. And I just leave them in for the moment. Now, I'm just going to do this very simply. I didn't want to do anything too complicated for this one. So I've just got a bit of green fabric. And I'm going to just move that to the side. I'm just going to get some of these pillows out of the way. Let's lay this down. Now, I like to try and use the scrap bits around the edges where possible. And as you can see here, I've previously used this for something else. And I've got this one little tag off this side that I'm going to use. So because this edge is a salvage edge, it does have a little bit of a sometimes salvage edges can have a little bit of holes and things. This one doesn't, and it's still the same colour, so I'm actually going to leave it on there and I'm going to go right up against this edge. So I only have to cut 2 sides, which is much more enjoyable. Now, again, a bit easier when you can pick this up and move it around, but I'm trying to work around this camera, so please excuse the awkwardness. I'm just going to lift this way. Now, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect with the backing. It's easier if you have a quilting machine, like a quilting mat and rotary cutter. But if you don't have it, don't go and buy it just for this. I don't know whether I've explained. I do have a bit of a quilting background. I did quilting a couple of years back now. So what you have is 2 pieces of fabric now. The backing and your front. Now, my backing, because it's just a plain green colour, it actually doesn't have a right or wrong side exactly. Although one side does look a little bit brighter green, and I'm going to use that as the right side. Now, to get your pillow started, you're going to place your owl and the backing fabric right sides together. As I said, it's not very important for this fabric, but say I was using something like this fabric. There's a very, very distinctive right side and wrong side. You can see there's a very distinct difference, and it's really important for that you have it right sides together. And we're going to place them right sides together. I'm carefully going to move my pins to the back side. Keeping them down that mark. I have done this with even weaves as well, and does work the same. It just is slightly easier to do, but it's not a big deal. Now, what you do is you repin. Now you've got them on the back, you repin all those pins carefully. So they're sitting there. Now, if you don't have pins, what could you use for this step? Well, if you've got a couple of extra needles hanging around, you could use them, because you only really need a couple of pins. It's just to hold this together. Or you've got some safety pins. So pins are not needed, they're helpful. And in the end, you could do this without pins at all. So now our right sides are together and it's pinned together, because this is going to make this next thing. Now, this one's done by hand sewing. Now I've just got a grey thread. I would use something either that matches the colours in the fabric, the backing fabric that you're using, or my favourite thing is I just use a cream or a grey. I find a nice cream, nice grey, nice lighter grey, they just go with everything, and you never have to use them. And then you can just keep using and using and using them, and they're not going to show through really well. So you pull off a bit of thread, let's cut it. And now when I'm hand sewing, I always double the thread over, because what this gives is when your fabric, trying to thread this needle. Needle's a bit old, so it's actually a bit rusty. Not the best, but I can't actually find my needle thing at the moment. I'm not the best at threading needles. It's taken me a bit longer than I expected it to. Okay. Let's do this. So, got your needle and thread. So you can see it's doubled over the whole way down. I hope you can see it's doubled over. And when I'm hand sewing, I do tie a knot. You just knot it over. And then you knot it over again and try and catch it over that same knot. Oh, get a bit more comfy. Okay, nice and tight and all knotted there. Now, when we're going to hand sew this, we're going to do it a bit differently than I would if you were putting it on the machine. Just trying to get just a bit of fluff. Yeah. Just trying to get the corners looking the same. So what we're going to do is going to carefully do a running stitch along the top and then carefully do a running stitch along the bottom from one side to the next. So this is why we've got these that 5 stitch mark. That's the line we're going to work down. So 1, 2. Now I always like to start pull it all the way through. So we're just going to run a running stitch down. Try and keep them as small as you can and tight, and don't just run down the holes of the Aida. It is very tempting to do. I know, because I want to, because it feels like it should be right. Get that sorted and held there. Don't just run down the holes in the Aida, because otherwise you're going to end up with it not looking quite right. But try and keep your stitches neat and as even as possible. Okay, I've just caught that bit of fluff. That's nice. Okay. I'm just going to do this bit off the camera. Basically a running stitch. Back down, up, down. I keep getting tangled because I'm trying to work around the camera and stitches. So I will be back in a moment with that top row done to show you. Okay, Alright, now I've got to the end of the row. So what I'm going to do just to finish it off, so I'm going to come through and then I'm going to come back a couple of times. If you keep getting tangled around those pins, once you've got it started, you can just remove them and come back and put it in again later. So I'm just going to go down and back up. You create this sort of a lock by going back and forth. And that'll be held solid. Cut off with a bit of a tail. And you can get an idea as you pull it apart what it's going to look like when it's turned around. Nice small stitches. You can see. I'm not perfect by any means. It was nice and that. Now I'm going to come off camera again and I'm going to do the bottom. So I'm going to stitch along this bottom, along that seam. The exact same way you do it on the top. Okay, I've got both top and bottom stitched up. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this now. The reason why I'm only stitching the top and the bottom is because if we turn it now, we can get the corners looking nice and crisp and the same. So, just going to work that seam and get it pressed with my fingers so it's looking all neat and tidy. And you can see here, that's what it looks like. So a nice solid seam. That's why you want to keep your stitches smaller, so it looks nice and neat. Okay. So I've got the top and the bottom seams done. Now we're going to sew the sides. So this one, we're going to finger fold it down that line. So, again, this is a really nice thing about Ada. You can get it down that line really neatly. When you get to the edge, just fold it neatly. Do it on both sides. Make sure that the excess fabric is folded towards the backing where it's not quite so thick. You can see here. Now once you got the front folded, you pull the front and those corners folded, you'll pull it and the back will kind of settle down and you just fold it down to match. Nice even seam. And just make sure, finger press it down. And I just use a pin to hold it closed. Now you do it on one side. And now we're going to learn the ladder stitch. So what you were doing was just a running stitch. The ladder stitch is very similar, but it's working on the inside. Now, we're going to have to get a new... No, I got enough. Give me a sec. So you want to put a knot at the end of your thread like you did before. Now this is also called an invisible close. So if you're looking for the instructions for this somewhere online, if you look for an invisible close is often what you're after. So because we're working on this now, I'm going to pull that out. Now, bring it under that seam and bring it out and up the corner. It's held there, and then refold that down. Okay, so that knot will hold it into that corner. Okay, you can see how our two pieces are held together here. I've come up the green. So I'm going to run along, couple stitches down the Aida side, and then you come exactly where you came out of the Aida into the fabric side. And running back and forth. See? Coming across to the Aida. Again, try not to keep going into the Aida at the holes. It's very tempting to do, but if you keep doing that, it's going to be very noticeable. And you can see here how you can't really notice the fact of what you're doing. So you keep coming back and forth the whole way down. I'll try and get some close-ups for you. Going into there. Run along a little bit. And then come across. Go into there. Now you notice those couple of stitches are a bit loose. All you have to do is pull your thread tight every 2 or 3 stitches. And it just brings it together. And you keep working down. Now I'm going to come off camera again, and then we're going to talk about stuffing it. So when I get to the end, again I just go down, tie the knot, and then thread it through inside. But I'll show you that when I get up to there. Okay, so I've got to the end. So you can see the whole seam down the side. So I've got to the end. And what I tend to do is catch a couple of things, come up, and then make a knot. Pull that tight. I'll do that a couple of times. And then I'll come down. I'll go down in the fabric just next to the knot. Bring that thread through and bring it down through somewhere. And pull it out. I generally try and get it into that seam itself. I missed a little bit this time. Cut it close to the fabric. And massage that fabric around. And that thread will often pull back through into the outside and backside. And there we go. So that's one side done. So now we have our awesome 3-sided pillow. So this is why, and you can see we've got 2 really nice crisp corners there. So this is why I did the first and second and then spun it around, is because we're going to end up with 4 crisp corners. I honestly don't bother to do it that way on the sewing machine. I will go 1, 2, 3 and then turn this side, and I've done it both ways. When you do it, so this you can see slightly pokey corner and then a much crisper corner, because this is the one I've hand sewed across. When I have a choice, when the piece is a bit bigger, I'll actually go midway, come round, all the way round, and then stop there and pull through an opening on one side. So all 4 of the corners are done exactly the same way. So depends how you want it to look. I figured I'd teach you the best way, and then you can choose how lazy you're going to be. Now, with 3 of the sides done, next comes the fun part. Stuffing! Now, I'm using just a Hobbyfill stuffing that I showed you in the supplies list. It's what I have. But because I'm constantly making toys and pillows and all sorts of things, so it's worth it for me to buy. But if you don't want to go out and buy a whole thing full of stuffing, have you got an old pillow that you're due to replace? A cushion that's been sitting on the couch? Well, it's got to a point where you know you really need to replace it. So cut into that and use that instead. Now, I will say we're going to start by doing exactly the same thing we did before. So we're going to bend it over on that spot, because you need to know where that seam is going to be now before you stuff it. Again, making sure that's bent to the backside. Okay. So we're just doing exactly what we did before. Okay. And you can see it settling in there. Now, we're just hand crisping it, hand pressing it. Honestly, you can get on to do this with an iron as well if you want to. I don't see a need to do it. I often find just doing it with my fingers is enough to give you a decent spot to work from. Okay. Now, we'll open up our pillow and we'll get stuffing. Now, particularly with such a small thing, go bit by bit, little bit by little bit. You're less likely to get lumps. And the first place you want to go is into these corners. So you push it into your corners and then you work through the rest. And this is exactly the same no matter what sort of shape you're trying to stuff. You go first into the corners and then into the big areas. And just little bit by little bit. Now, it takes a surprisingly large amount of stuffing for the size. You want it to be comfortably stuffed. So you can see here, we're getting close. Also remember the fact that we do have to close it. So do keep testing it, pulling it closed, and seeing how it feels. So I'm getting very close here. And I got, so it's not, I haven't stuffed this as heavy as I would if I was doing a toy. Because this little guy just needs to look fluffy. He doesn't need to handle the constantly being attacked by kids. But I'm going to put just a little bit extra. I like that now. So he's got, to me, feels like the right level for what I want. And then you finish him up with the ladder stitch, the exact same ladder stitch that you just did before. So exactly what you did on this side here, you're going to do on this side. Okay, so I'm going to go thread my needle and get started, and we'll show you the finished pillow. So, just a quick thing. So needle threaded with a knot at the end, and you come through exactly the same way you did before. So coming up into that corner, from the inside out, so it catches. And the biggest thing to notice is you just got to work around. Make sure you keep pushing that stuffing down when you're working through this one. Again, so I came up the green side. I go along the Ada side. And it's back and forth. So remember the ladder stitch, when you come out of the Ada, you got to go back into the fabric at the exact same point. Try and keep your stitches small. Oh, I'm surprised I haven't done that before this. Try and keep your stitches small. The smaller they are, the less noticeable they're going to be. So you can see here on this one, so this is machine sewed, how tight those stitches are. And you look at this end where I've sewn it. Now they're fairly big and fairly noticeable. But if you look at this one, where I've sewn it along this side, again, hand sewed, exactly the same stitch. It's not noticeable because I've done it really nice and tight. So I've tried to keep the same distance on the top and the side. And that will give you a neat finish, whether you're hand sewing or on the machine. If you keep your stitches even and about the same, no matter what. Okay, so I'm going to see you at the other side. Okay, as per normal, get to the end. Okay, try not to do that. So I just managed to cut my thread off. Oh well, I'm going to finish this one with something that covers that anyway. Now, the last part you want to do is just resettle the stuffing. So just shuffle it around so it's sitting up against that edge. And there is your pillow finish. Now, I'm actually going to link you to instructions on how to add a patchwork edge around the edge before doing this, but the sewing is exactly the same. And whether you want to do one panel or two. The other thing that I did mention in the supplies is using some sort of aligner if you want. Now you are welcome to do that. You just put some sort of interfacing on both the back of the Aida and the back of the fabric, and it just adds a little bit extra bulk. I'll also, if I want to do it flat, I'll sometimes use a wadding. So just add a little bit of padding inside. Okay. And something to know what you can do. So this is just a little pillow finish I did ages ago. I've actually got a full set of these. I've got a couple other items with some of my cross-stitch sewing supply patterns on them. But this is just a cute little pillow finish I've done, and I use it constantly as a pin cushion. So you can use your cross-stitch for that too, which is something good to know. So here's my cute little pillow finish. And as you can see, because we did all the corners the way we did, they all look exactly the same. Nice and crisp. That can be hidden if you do this sort of thing anyway, because it's not as noticeable when you do this sort of corded finish. Or this sort of finish. But if you do want the slightly exposed corners from this one, so you'll notice the corners. So I'm going to link you to a tutorial I did on how to make your cross stitch as a hanger. So it's just a photo tutorial, but it has the instructions on how to add a top and bottom and side panels if you want to turn your cross stitch into give it a little bit extra around the edge. Now there's no reason why you can't choose like this one just to add a panel on the side, or you can add a panel top and bottom, or in the case of this one, because it's very long, add a panel on each side so it's longer than it is wide. So in the case of this little one, now I am going to try and get a couple more pillow finishes done this week so I can do up a couple of instructions. But in the case of this little one, I will probably add a top, bottom, and two sides to it, because it just adds a little bit extra size. Because he's as big as the owl is, without the rest. Now, there are a couple of little other finishes we can do, and I'll have a talk about this next week with you. But you've got things like this little finish, which is exactly the same ribbon as in those other ones, but instead of turning into a pillow, I've just cut carefully around the edge and then I've glued it onto some felt. And we'll talk about gluing next week when we talk about the trim and how to use the glue properly. But this is an option for smaller ones or ones that you don't want to do as a pillow finish. And then we've got this one. Now this is called a flat finish. And it's actually done onto 2 pieces of foam core. So it's a kind of board. And you pull it around and either lace it as if you were going to frame it. Or I think in this case I've glued it down and held it together with pegs. And then you glue the ribbon around the edge. And just a different kind of top. So no bow. It's just these loops that I've laid down. So this is a different sort of finish. Again, I will link to some pictures of when I've done this before. I am not going to do a full instructions on how to do this sort of finish. If you do have questions though, after I I'll link this all next week. After I link you how to do this, please ask and I'll see if I can help. But that's 2 other kind of ornament finishes you can do. So I hope you like this. I look forward to seeing how your pillows turn out. Now do remember you can use any sort of fabric for the back. This is just a plain green quilting fabric. You can use more patterned ones, something bright. Let your imagination go wild, have some fun in Spotlight. Do we need an excuse? But enjoy.